right, hello everybody. My name is Raymond Pang, and I'm a digital engagement lead at Apogee, and we are part of Google Cloud. I want to thank you guys all for joining me today. I really hope you get as much out of today's webinar and insights, and it's a great use of your time. And just to give you a little introduction about myself, as a digital engagement lead with Apogee, I work with customers from all sorts of industries to help them establish, accelerate, and scale up their API programs. In the last 15 years of consulting, I've led pretty large-scale digital transformation programs working hand-in-hand with executives and leaders from strategy through operations. Before we get started, I thought I'd just give a shout-out to my colleague here, Stephanie Wu, who is fabulous to work with, and she's been orchestrating a lot of these webinars, so thank you, Stephanie. And she's expecting soon, so best of luck and congratulations.
Thank you.
And also today, we have a guest appearance from my colleague, Chris Hood, who, like me, is an expert in this field. And
hello.
I'm going to ask Chris, hey, Chris, thank you for joining. I'm going to ask Chris to help us channel and describe some of the challenges that he has faced with his customers. And so I think he's going to have a ton of insight for us as well. Thank you for joining, Chris. All right, so let's get started. So to set the stage, I think it's important to point out to what is driving companies to digitally transform, and some might say digitally evolve. All of us are way more digitally connected these days with, our smartphones, watches, home, and IoT devices everywhere, right? I have a Nest at home. I have the Google Home device. It's really everywhere. And I think pretty soon cars could be like our second home office, especially if you're like me with a terrible commute. So the rate at which connectivity is increasing is tremendous. And as the number of connected devices grow, they're also gradually becoming faster, they're more useful, and integrated with our daily lives, right? And I think you all know that. And interestingly, Intel estimates that in only 3 years, there'll be roughly 200 billion connected objects in the world. And that's, I think, roughly comes out to about 26 devices per person. So I think we're getting closer to becoming like human cyborgs, in 3 years. But what that really means is this growth in connectivity and really the utility that they provide is having a pretty dramatic impact on our consumer behavior. So it's the demand effect. And the same-day delivery from, it's that on-demand effect. It's like that same-day delivery from Amazon Prime we all start to expect. And, not only do we have growing expectations of fast, seamless, personalized, ubiquitous experience, no matter where we are, we also project these expectations on any experience. So companies, probably yours as well, have been working hard to catch up with the consumer, right? And so, we know experience matters, and those companies who know how to place themselves where the consumer is will win. None of these companies need any introduction. They're just part of our daily lives. But I think one of the aspects that is really amazing is how these guys are so good at creating demand at scale. So YouTube, Facebook, don't have to create their own content, but make millions of connections for people every minute, right? Uber owns no taxi, but they've become one of the largest taxi companies in the world. And Apple and Google don't have to make most of the apps in their marketplace, but it is the place to sell as well as to get apps for your smartphone. So these are great stories, but you might be thinking that your company isn't a technology company or maybe not even a digitally native company. And you don't have the same business model, right? So you feel like, well, how can I be like these guys if I didn't start like that? And I think that's the key question that might be challenging for people, but I really think it's time to think differently, and that's not a problem at all. Because we see customers in your industry that have done this and are able to think like this, right? They have figured out that the key is creating a digital platform. It's not just about going to cloud or selling your goods on your .com or using a slicker mobile app. Digitally mature companies have figured out that they can turn their business into a digital platform business using APIs. They are able to set a platform where it is not only includes their goods and services, but they can be combined with other third-party producers. So all of these combined goods and services are exposed through APIs to all sorts of consumers, whether it is their own apps or that of partners, affiliates, or independent third parties. And some of you on the phone are probably pretty familiar with this. And like Uber or Facebook, this generates what is called a network effect, right? So where the increase of consumers and producers on both sides, it becomes exponentially increasing the value of the platform through the number of connections it's made possible, right? So just like Uber, if I have more drivers and more people looking for rides, right, that increases the availability, right? So I can get Ubers at 3 a.m. in the morning if I need to. By doing so, these companies like that have created a digital ecosystem where they can go to market faster, they can innovate at scale, and be closer to the customer than they ever were before. And APIs have powered their digital transformation. So I hope this resonates with folks on this call. I think it's a really key concept here, and that is APIs power the digital transformation, right? And so let's think a little bit about what that means in terms of what are the enablers here. So APIs have been around for a long time. Many of you at your companies probably have a lot of APIs, probably been using them. And you're probably using them internally to connect disparate systems within your network, right? However, to make digital transformation happen, APIs need to connect to outside the company's firewall, right? And hopefully with dozens, if not hundreds of parties. Releasing APIs at the scale with the security, with reliability that an enterprise digital platform company needs. It's really quite different. And if a company has hundreds of APIs, right, with billions of transactions a day or a month or per month, many internal and external developers could be connecting to it. That's quite difficult to ensure that consistency, reuse, and maintainability. In addition, if you're building APIs internally today, you're probably not getting detailed analytics. And so you want to understand who's coming and who's using your APIs and how they're performing. And it's really becoming essential to optimize your APIs on the platform. We do this on digital today all the time, but we don't think about it in terms of APIs. So Apigee in Google Cloud is the market leader in this category. And if you're serious about digital transformation, an API management platform will be essential. This webinar isn't about Apigee as a product, so if you're interested in finding more, contact us through apigee.com. A little bit of brevity here. Ironically, while all this is great, I'm sure you all experienced this or something like this, right? If it's not the budget or it's the hiring freeze or legacy development processes or siloed teams, it's something else, right? And so you're not alone. Digital transformation is tough because it really requires the operations of a company to change. And so my work often begins working with leaders in IT and digital to understand their vision, alignment, and execution. And in the beginning, leadership is often focused on ramping up on technology, scrutinize, the security and the infrastructure side. But really quickly, literally, I think within 2 hours of a workshop that I run, we start to see that the challenges are not with technology, right? And those things get figured out. And eventually, we always come to a path forward where security is aligned to the approach of the new platform. The real challenges are always more culture and organizational structure oriented. So the work that we have done across hundreds of companies, we have seen 10 common dimensions, right? And these appear as leading indicators of where the challenges are internally that might slow down the digital transformation. So just read them out. I'm going to read them out on the right here. Platform, APIs, ecosystem, outside in, leadership, funding, metrics, SDLC, talent, and self-service. And I think those of you who've kind of been through this will probably resonate fairly well with all of these concepts as, from a standpoint of vision, alignment, and execution, these are some of the challenges that we face and are sort of indicators of digital maturity. And so to help our customers better assess their own challenges, we created a diagnostics tool called Apigee Compass. I use Compass face-to-face with our customers, but you can also take the assessment yourself online. And through a series of 10 questions, Compass helps you understand where your biggest hurdles are in an pretty easy to understand graphical manner, right? You can clearly see which of the dimensions you might be lagging and where you might be leading in the circle that you see here. And based on the composite of all your answers, we used our combined experience and insights into the actual algorithm of the Compass model. And we used it based on all of our customer base and what they've told us. And we provide a pretty strategic recommendation that prioritized specifically based on your assessment. I think it's a really powerful tool, and I'll actually work with my colleague Chris on the phone today later, and we'll run through Compass together right on this webinar. And so you'll see how it works, and I hope you all have a chance to use it as well. It's very simple, and I think what the insights are very, very powerful. So based on the many submissions, like I said, of Compass, we see a recurring pattern. And many companies, actually 61%, are more likely to use platform strategies, and 25% are building ecosystems and figuring out how to enter new markets. So that's great, right? There is enough of vision and ambition there towards digital transformation. The strategy is clear enough, I'd say. However, when we look at the ability to execute on the execution side of the equation, right, on the right, this is where we find companies are really struggling. Of the top challenges, 3 tend to stand out. Many companies still don't see APIs as strategic assets and digital products, right? Instead, they are relegated to system integration technology. In addition, if they have the strategy, it's really lacking in real executive support. And third, APIs are hard to use. There's very limited or no ability for a developer, internal, external, to pick up the API and quickly start using them without any assistance. And we see that this basically means that self-service, and enablement hasn't been prioritized by these companies. So this is a typical challenge where we see like vision and strategy, and the ambition is there, but then we fall short on the ability to execute and prioritize the right things. And that is a challenge. So in the end, I think that easy to say is, or one saying is, aspiration is easy, execution is hard. A little bit of a downer there, right? But I want to share with you guys the reason why we have this webinar is we believe that it's not impossible, and we've seen customers succeed in the past, and many of them have. And there are 2 principles I think I could help share with you to accelerate towards digital transformation, because customers that have faced those challenges have started to stall out or facing problems, and they can't get over the rut. But really, some of these might kickstart or help revitalize what you're facing right now. First, I think the first thing is oriented, the first principle that I have is oriented towards having a clear vision. And the second is oriented towards execution. And so I'll talk about both of those things in sequence, okay? The first one, right? Too often, I meet customers and prospective customers, who's purchasing software, and it's rooted in modernization, right? So that's a good thing, right? Technology changes, we got to keep up. And so it'll generate savings. You'll be in the cloud, or you have a better integrated mobile or web experience driving efficiencies. That's good, right? However, these tools, you got to remember, are already in the hands of your competitors, right? What you can buy, your competitors can also buy. The disruptors and digital natives and new entrants also have access to the same tech, right? And potentially, they have leaner processes. So modernization is essential. It's table stakes. It's something you have to do to keep up. But differentiation comes by embracing the shift of supply and demand. And that means making an ecosystem strategy that changes the current value chain. Sounds like a lot of buzzwords. So maybe let's look at an example. Yeah. One of our current customers, Ticketmaster, they started out with a traditional business model of selling tickets, right? So they had development teams that would create applications that allow their sales reps to sell tickets online, and fans would go to their web and mobile apps to purchase. I think that's pretty typical. Most of us are doing a lot of this, especially on like Cyber Mondays. Now, however, Ticketmaster recognized that the competition was increasing, and consumers were more connected than ever, and they had a lot of choices, right? Kind of the concepts we talked about in terms of, the changing environment. So they had to rethink their strategy. In addition to their app development team, Ticketmaster started by adding API skill sets to build out Ticketmaster APIs. Okay, and they started first by converting their back-end services that enabled ticket browsing and purchasing into APIs. And just by adding APIs in the middle allowed Ticketmaster to have a loosely coupled architecture. And this is pretty typical in terms of a two-tier architecture, or sometimes people call it two-speed architecture, which is separating their front end from the back-end services with APIs as the intermediary, allowing their front-end teams to release and update the experiences more often, and that also enabled their back-end services teams to keep up without incurring long regression cycles. Right? So this is pretty typical as the next step in terms of modernizing your IT infrastructure as well as creating more agility internally. But they quickly realized that APIs for .com was also reusable for external sites, right? Because what they had made internally could also be turned external. And the thing was, the reason why they thought about this is I think you all recognize this, is that as a fan, if I'm a sports fan or I want to buy tickets, I don't always think about that. They're fans. They might be, online watching sports. They might be looking at stats or news. They're on social media. They're doing online shopping, right? And so they're not necessarily on Ticketmaster. And rather than forcing their users to switch from site to site and go to Ticketmaster, Ticketmaster really needed to be where their fan was in the moment of that user's experience, right? So how many of us have been doing something and then all of a sudden we had to switch over to fill out another form on a different site? The drop-off on that point is pretty severe. And so they realized that they couldn't just build APIs and expect partners to just pick them up, because if they could externalize their APIs, then they could get all these other sites to pick them up. But the question was, how do they build partnerships at a business level one by one? They'd have to do that. But they also soon, and that was something that they're familiar with. Most companies do that, right? But they soon recognized that there was a key adoption point of this new value chain, which is the developer, right? The app developer. And so they could create go-to-market plans with sports news networks or social media, but in the end, it came down to whether that app developer could easily pick up Ticketmaster's APIs and quickly implement it. That app developer was critical in making this collaboration feasible, right? And to reduce the friction in their ecosystem, Ticketmaster stood up a developer portal where their APIs, documentation, sample working code, and support was all accessible. And they could build it once and serve many developers, right? It wasn't bespoke to one in particular. And as a result of these partnerships, they started adding partners, right? So we had Costco and Fox Sports, Facebook, and Broadway.com, and they started to see more traffic and transactions as their ecosystem had substantially multiplied beyond their own apps, right? Their APIs became not only the conduit for their own digital properties, but was now conduit for which their business transactions flowed, and were driving, or was a channel to drive additional revenue that they didn't have before. And because their APIs helped them decouple their backend from the application experience, they were also able to innovate more themselves. Interestingly, they added Google Dialogflow to their ecosystem, and they were able to use speech recognition and conversation technology to make ordering by voice easier on a completely new channel inside the home, right? And I thought this was pretty amazing because all of Google's technology enabled them to create this rich speech experience, and they could just reuse their existing Ticketmaster APIs to perform browsing and ticket purchasing, right? So half of it was already done even before they even took on Google's technology. And Ticketmaster didn't just stop there, right? So I think even at that point, you kind of just see like the exponential increase in terms on the consumption side. But Ticketmaster didn't just stop there. In addition to generating the additional demand on the left side of the equation, right, so the Costco's and Facebook and the Google Home devices and all that, right, they also started to look at the supply side. And that's what we're talking about in terms of true network effect of an ecosystem. So with their digital platform, they could also consume and add third-party APIs, right? And so these third-party APIs would increase their supply. So basically, essentially, these were ticket sellers and providers who had access to events or venues that weren't Ticketmaster's. They were entirely owned by these other providers. And these ticket suppliers would sell them and onboard to Ticketmaster's developer portal and begin exposing their ticket supply through the APIs that Ticketmaster had. And this, in turn, augmented the total supply of tickets available through Ticketmaster's distribution channel. So that's creating even more and greater value proposition to onboarding more third-party suppliers, right? Because now Ticketmaster has this great demand in multiple channels where people are buying tickets. And now people see that there's now more potential tickets than what Ticketmaster owns, because Ticketmaster now has more tickets available than what it has in its own supply, because it's augmented by third-party providers. And so this network effect has created I would say, just a total increase in interest in terms of what people are coming to the platform for, right? Pretty amazing. So the sum of these API connections in their ecosystem have certainly increased the speed and scale at which they innovate and compete. I think that's pretty obvious. But you could also argue that as a result, Ticketmaster's business is harder to displace, right? And I think that's pretty interesting, because these new lines of technology enable distribution partnerships that have increased their total firm value, right? It's a lot harder to displace Ticketmaster that has now created all these different lines of assets, right? These APIs are now core business assets to the company, right? And that's increased, I would think, of their total firm value. So stepping back, we have a fairly traditional commerce model that could have continued the same business models before, right? They could have stayed the old course. They could have limited supply and limited delivery channels. Instead, Ticketmaster decided to use the ecosystem strategy. Adopting this strategy changed the very nature of where, how, and what they competed on, right? It gave them access to new channels of demand without having to build it themselves. It gave them access to new supply that they didn't have to create in order to bring to the market. And I think also benefit to a lot who are in IT, to underscore the previous benefits, the digital platform that was created can onboard new channels and new business services at fractional technology costs of what it took to do the first few, right? And I think that's really powerful if you're coming from an IT enterprise side, because it's like that gift that keeps on giving. I'm going to give you guys another example and of a company that's executed on this ecosystem strategy principle. So Walgreens has been a long partner with Apogee, and over the many years, they've built up quite an ecosystem. If you kind of followed us along, you might have heard of this story. And the results have been amazing. The ecosystem has generated more traffic for Walgreens overall. And in addition, I think it's most telling to take a look at the consumption side of Walgreens. And just to step back a little bit, long story short, Walgreens first started experimenting with the ecosystem using photo prints as their first API to go to market. So they weren't sure if partners are interested, but they knew that if people were going to print photos, they would end up coming to Walgreens. And when you're in the retail Walgreens store, you're going to buy something before you leave. So they realized there was a sticky asset that they had, or at least an attractive asset that they had, that they could expose to partners. And sure enough, tons of partners were interested. And not only were these partners interested, they started building more experiences, and they found out that they can monetize both the apps that the partners created and share a piece of the revenue, because the partners were basically generating incoming transactions, photo prints, and foot traffic to the stores. So there was a symbiotic relationship where partners would help create apps, and then they would also get a piece of the traffic that came in. And so if you look at, in the end, just what Walgreens did, they took that model, they looked at loyalty rewards program, digital offers, and prescription refills. They had a ton more consumption aside, creating just based off these few API sets that they had. And I think that, like I said, the numbers are most telling. Here we have 40 million patients access Walgreens from third-party apps. And 100 plus partners are building on Walgreens APIs. That's a lot. That's really a lot. And imagine just forgetting about, all that business side. Just as a customer or a patient, imagine how much convenience it is for Walgreens customers and patients who now can shop and make prescription refills on their terms. That's pretty convenient. That would make me stick with Walgreens. And on the flip side, Walgreens and their teams don't have to take full maintenance responsibility for these experiences. And if you're continuously going up for R&D investment to improve and innovate, now you don't have to do that because you've got partners, hundreds of partners doing that. And their focus can be instead on building stronger partnerships and APIs which are shared across their partners. Right? It completely changes the focus of IT. And IT isn't really about a cost play here, right? It's really about a business strategy play and a competitive play by building strategic partnerships and maintaining digital assets that are core business assets to the company. Again, driving that firm value. So I hope these two examples really help paint a better picture for you, right? So if you, in the beginning, you're kind of thinking, well, these are a lot of buzzwords, I hope that gives you some reality to what can be accomplished. And to recap it, principle number one is to accelerate digital transformation, make an ecosystem strategy, shift the nature of supply and demand. That's principle number one. Okay, so let's move on to principle number two. This is beyond just vision, but strikes at the challenges that create roadblocks within the organization. APIs are not just another technology, but instead are products a business would create to go to market and drive sales and set operations around. So even with the vision of the ecosystem, changing the way companies and executives perceive APIs is a real breakthrough challenge. Right? We find this concept foreign for many, especially within IT, because I think for so long APIs have been used for system integration as a means to an end. They have not been embraced as business value driving entities like the way Ticketmaster or Walgreens have chosen to see them. So the first step is to reframe the focus. To grow the ecosystem, like any good business, we need to put the focus on our customers. And in this case, the developers are the users of APIs in the ecosystem. Furthermore, these APIs need to be marketed and packaged to developers to make it attractive and easy to use. This requires think of APIs not as a way, programming concept, which typically is what is thought, but actually as a business product. So that means that there's a couple of things there. This reframing to developers as customers and APIs as products is both a mindset shift and an organizational model. Most companies have digital teams and channel partner teams, but they're often separate teams and have different priorities. I think some of you probably see that. And many companies have IT teams who own APIs, but these folks are often way downstream from the business. And many digital teams use APIs, and some of them even own them. So they focus on their internal use cases to tailor their own digital property rather than expanding APIs to be reusable. So basically, we have this weird gap where no one owns all of it, and yet everyone owns a slice of the pie. And I think at this point it takes leadership, real leadership, to form a cross-functional team representing business partnerships in IT. I often think or see this team get created, but it's missing one or two legs of the stool. And the business and partnership side is usually what's missing. So the emphasis here is on cross-functional. Right? Build your cross-functional team. So like selling any product, the new API program team, which is cross-functional, should focus on the buying experience. This is likely different from organizations who think of APIs as traditional projects, right, which are focused on scope delivery, technical design, or like budgets. Right? It's much more than that. So put yourselves in the shoes of a third-party developer who is not part of the organization. What are they going to want to do? They want to look at the documentation. They want to understand what the API does before they commit or buy it. They want to test it out and see what sample requests look like and the sample data. So the key question is, can you get a Hello World app with the API app in 5 minutes? Right? And that's the true telling of how much friction you've taken out of the system, how easy you've made it. And so these are the kind of things that API programs should also concern themselves with. We have seen so many customers focus on the if we build it, they'll come approach. And oftentimes programs stall out. They focus on the customer and their experience in buying the API. And when I say buying, whether it's buying is monetary or not is not the issue. It's about removing any friction that enables them and empowers them to build on your APIs. And that's the key to accelerating the experience. So to recap, principle number 2, APIs are products. To accelerate digital transformation, the organization must cultivate and manage these assets like products by organizing a cross-functional team around go-to-market, growing, and managing the APIs and the ecosystem. APIs are products. To end on some of this stuff, or to recap it, I oftentimes see three common anti-patterns that occur. We all want to be different, but organizations or the culture just sometimes works against us, right? And seeing or having seen in the past, that you probably have seen or seen at the past the organizations that you work for or have worked with. So I want to go through some of these anti-patterns and ask you guys whether you have seen them yourselves. So the first one, A, is inside out versus outside in. And what we are seeing here is APIs are just technical infrastructure or best case projects that are exposing all the services regardless of whether it's used or not. And this is classic inside out versus outside in because these are typically IT initiatives rather than API first or strategic business initiatives. B is wrong funding model API. So that's programs are funded like traditional projects versus as a product that requires continuous resources. And also this anti-pattern is companies on the back office setting KPIs like uptime, latency, or number of APIs, but they're just not focused on how much business and third parties are consuming the APIs or whether those APIs are driving business revenue through them. Right? And C, the last anti-pattern, is the last one is despite the vision of ecosystem, the organization has not invested in prioritizing the ease of use and self-service. There's just too much friction to participate in the platform, and you see adoption suffer, right? So these are two. Again, it's like aspiration versus execution. So I'll just give you guys a minute there to choose and let me know what you're seeing and whether this is resonating. Okay, it's great to see that we have so many attendees from different industries representing a lot of different diverse geographies likely as well. So just thank you guys for participating. So let's take a look at what the polls are telling us. Interesting, very interesting. So if you look at this, I would say it's about equal where we have companies that are facing inside out versus outside in. That's usually, like I said, and I think you've seen this before, a top problem. Also focusing on the wrong funding models and KPIs. And I think we were also thinking about driving down into a future webinar about KPIs because this is a huge topic. And then the one ecosystem but no self-service, a third tier, but not nearly as big of an issue. And I think some of that is because the first part is setting an ecosystem and developing strategy, getting alignment, right? Before you get, and you got to get the funding and you got to get business involved in order for you to actually have the problem where you want to create more self-service. So I can understand A and B being definitely the top things that people are interested in. So this, I think this also resonates very well with what we're seeing. So let's move on. And I'm going to ask you guys to take this URL that we have here and fill out Apogee Compass with me, actually. So I'll just give you a moment to copy that down. It's a pretty simple, short URL. And so what we talked about before is giving you guys an ability to score yourselves against your digital maturity level and to look at the different factors and dimensions in which you might be facing challenges or you might be excelling in those, and how you should prioritize your strategy in terms of making gains on your digital acceleration. So Compass is a tool to do that. And so let's get started. If you copy that URL at this point, bit.ly/compass_apogee. Let's turn that over, and I'm going to have my colleague Chris.
Hello.
Hey, Chris. Thank you for joining me. So I'm going to bring up my version of Compass today online, and hopefully you guys are seeing that at this point. So I'm at the main page where Apogee Compass is hosted, and at this point you should be seeing the screen. And so let's get started. So Chris is here with me today, and Chris, maybe you can introduce yourself and tell us about the kind of role you're playing today.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thanks, Raymond. Great stuff so far. So for a quick introduction, my name is Chris Hood. I am the VP of Digital Development for a large telco company. We're investing in an enterprise API program to support various types of internal systems and build out actually an application platform to support consumer devices. And we also have relationships with about 9,000 retail stores across the U.S., and we would like to build some sort of digital experience between our point of sale systems, the inventory systems, and even our online service tools. So I'm excited to see, kind of where we're at.
Okay, great. And Chris and I are doing this role play together, and this is something that is pretty typical that you can do yourselves, or you can do it with your colleagues, and we'll talk through all that. So since Chris has seen so many different customers out in the field, I've asked him to come here today in this role play and to talk us through what he's seeing, which is pretty indicative of what our customers are facing. And I think it's just even his setup alone just now was, I think, pretty classic in terms of what we've seen. So Chris, let's start Compass together. And, we're going to start on the vision side of digital transformation. Tell me about the platform side. What is your digital business vision?
Sure. Our enterprise has a wide range of initiatives to create new digital businesses. However, some of the business units, such as like our retail locations, are focused more on sales than, say, building a platform. I could see the benefit of having a digital platform that integrates retail stores with our online stores, but for now, only our internal businesses are really focused on new platforms. So I think if I'm looking at these options, I would say some business units are building digital businesses.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's pretty typical as well, because we see that, there's definitely this push, right, in terms of becoming more digital. And so all companies are naturally taking their current business models and driving more revenue and sales channels from digital, right? So that's very typical. Thank you, Chris. Oh, I think I went a little too far. So let's go back. Hold on. Okay. So, Chris, let's go to the next one on vision side. How are APIs viewed today in your organization?
Oh, well, there are many different perspectives, I think, depending on who you're talking to or ask. All of these choices are probably going to be picked by somebody. Primarily, our first goal is to expose our assets internally to the partners. Now, there are managers and executives, I think, who view APIs as primarily system integration. We've talked about that. And we have to fight that kind of, fight the battle to help them see further than just, APIs as integration. But I would think we use APIs primarily to expose assets internally or to partners. I think that's where we're at today. I would like us to see us exposing them for other reasons, but I think that's what the current view is.
Okay, so it's more of an exposure play. And I think that's also pretty typical, but I think it's good that, one, it's not primarily a way to do system integration. I think that's very classic in terms of the perspective and how leadership has typically seen it. But I think once you start to becoming able to at least even expose some of those assets externally and to partners, you start to open up some pathways there. So that's great to hear. Next question, outside in. Does your organization, Chris, take an outside-in perspective when creating products and experiences for customers?
Yeah, this is another one. Our company typically has a pretty traditional view of APIs. As I mentioned earlier, they tend to see these as integration components. But we certainly are more of a build the APIs and then have the business, use what's there for whatever the reason, whether that's use on the outside or the inside. However, from our retail store level, we are definitely striving to present customers with a great experience. I just think those two areas are disconnected today. And so I feel, our hope is to really get both the internal applications and the external experiences that we're so strong about to be more aligned. So today, we build products and experiences based on the services that IT tells us, but I do think our overall vision is more that our business and IT are going to be converged into teams to work together.
Okay. So would you say you pick one of these, it seems like you could go either way, but current state you are still building the service based on what IT has.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at today. But if this is vision, then I would say that our vision is definitely to get converged into teams to work together. So I'm good with either.
All right. Okay. All right. Yeah. So we kind of like to think of Compass as your current state. So like I said, aspiration is easy, execution is hard. So just being honest about yourself in terms of where you are, I think is important. So I'm going to just say that at this point you are exposing your services based on what IT has. Since your aspiration is you know where you want to go, but you have to get there first.
Yep.
So let's go to the next one, Chris. Ecosystem. How does your organization engage with its ecosystem of partners?
Yeah, we haven't done much on this, really. I think most of our partnerships through the retail are definitely traditional marketing sales types of opportunities and not digital opportunities. But this is exactly one of the things that we are trying to do in our API program. We want to grow those partnerships and connect more of our devices and our partners' devices and applications together. But today, I think the best answer still is probably we are forming new partnerships and extending into adjacent markets. Okay,
great. Yeah, and I think that's telling too, right? Because I think typically, you would have marketing relationships and different partners that you work on, but they're really sort of still driving traffic to your own digital experiences. And it's not about that business partnership where you're creating and going outside of your own digital domain. So I think that's interesting, and that's good that you guys are starting. So let's move into the alignment side and leadership. Who's leading your organization's API first charge?
I think we have some leadership support. I mean, I definitely think we have the support that we're looking for, but part of the initiative really is going to be to demonstrate success of the program and then present that value back to our executives, like our CIO level. I would like to see more support from the top down, but I do believe that most people in the organization, just in general, do see the need to grow our digital capabilities. So it's not directly executive support, but I do think leadership understands where we're headed. I'd say that many business leaders are driving their products and services with an API-first approach, but not all of them.
Okay, well, that's good. I mean, I think, certainly we face challenges where we see enough executive mandate, but there's also the thing is, prove it to me. So I think the fact that you have business leadership involved, mandating API first approach is, I think, a great step. So let's go to funding. What is the state of funding for your organization's API program?
Yeah, this is a tough one. Like I said before, we kind of have to try to prove success or value in some way. So a lot of what we do does come down to ROI. I think, we're a large organization, so capital projects are still compared, against each other. We have a platform team, so we are funding that at that level. And that then goes back up to a steering committee, and we've got quarterly reviews to demonstrate the progress. There's a lot of almost kind of governance involved with the funding aspect. I think my personal hope is that the API platform lowers development costs, in general, substantially, we hope. That will ultimately, it will prove itself. So on this, I'm not sure. I know we have funded company-wide initiative for the API platform, but I think, we have a funding mechanism to build APIs really only for specific projects. I think that's probably more accurate.
Okay. All right. Pretty typical as well. Okay. Thank you, Chris. All right, in metrics, how is it effective? How is the effectiveness of your API program measured?
Yeah, so here's another great example where we have incredible metrics. You know, when we look at our retail outlets, store relations, online shopping, internal systems, you know, by region, by demographic, all of that is incredible. But if you're talking specifically about metrics around APIs, we don't have anything. You know, we're not measuring the impact of APIs specifically at all.
Right.
All of that is incredible.
Okay, thank you. And then, Chris, what about on the software development lifecycle front? Is your organization using DevOps, Agile, CI/CD, and other modern software development practices in context of your API strategy?
So we're pretty traditional waterfall, but I think in the last 2 years or so, we've made a huge shift to Agile. It's not easy. I think, again, as you talked about, there's a lot of cultural impact to making that shift to Agile. But we are in that process. I think it is working. I'd say more than half, but not all of our software development teams follow a modern best practice, Agile.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. And then on talent, where does API First talent rank and stand in your organization?
Talent, this is another hard one, I think. I think we're somewhere in the middle of more than half or less than half design of delivering APIs. You know, I would say that if we put a strict definition to it, we've got the right people in place, but I don't think that we have the right teams in place to do what we're talking about here. Again, I think this is sort of a work in progress. We've got to demonstrate value and success, and I think from that, we're going to be able to build out the team a little bit more. But I would say that we probably have fewer than half of our teams are designed to deliver APIs. And again, I think that's typically only for special projects.
Yeah. Okay. And that's also pretty typical. It's what I've seen as well. So last question then, self-service. What is the level of self-service that's available for developers to use the modern APIs across your organization? We have internal sites for documentation, but they're often inconsistent, out of date, you know. Because the API development is organic, they are spread across various IT service providers, IT teams. You know, we're pretty project-based again, so some of this, you know, just comes as needed. It could be, I'd say our self-service processes are manual, so I guess they're not really self-service processes. Right.
So with access provided in a week or more, yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, we see a lot of that in terms of documentation sprinkled on internal sites and all, but you know, distributed, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to submit the survey. Thank you, Chris. Now I have to prove that I am a human being filling out the survey. Make sure I find all the images of cars. Let's see. Always a fun game. Verify. Okay. So now Compass is going to take a look at the results or the answers and give me the composite score, and in this case, give us the composite score. So, Chris, just give you a second to take a look at it. Does this score, and actually, we'll park that for a second. For those that are looking at this with me, when you fill out your Compass score, you're going to see a couple different components here. The first one is your composite score, like I said before. How you've rated yourself across those 10 questions are reflected in these bars that are showing. And the more mature you are in terms of where you are in your current state, you're going to see the bars steadily reach upwards into green. What it also does is it takes the composite score and gives you a final score, which is, in this case, Chris's score is 48 for his telecom company. And it tells you just generally where you stand from a maturity standpoint, whether you're lagging, progressing, competitive, or leading. And having done this many times with customers, we've seen scores between 40s to 50s, sometimes the 60s. Companies who've really invested in ecosystem and are aligned with their business and are not just doing modernization have seen scores, much more in the competitive and leading categories. So it's really about thinking about the holistic solution. But like I said, embrace those two principles that I've talked about in terms of accelerating digital transformation. And I think one of the things, if you look at even what Chris's results are, you can take a look, and this is where the recommendations come in. They're sequenced in order. So this is saying that, Chris, your company, as a telecom provider, here's one of the first things you should do that would make the biggest change. Embrace outside-in API-first design, which is basically bring your business involved. And we talked about that. If your business is already starting to think about digital, but yet you haven't merged, this is a time for real leadership to happen and build those cross-functional teams and start to using APIs in all digital experiences. And you can open these up and you can see the different recommendations. There's not only just the write-up here, but you'll have hyperlinks in here that you can click on, and we actually have full articles and different community resources for you to look at on apogee.com. And we have a pretty vibrant community there that talks about some of these concepts and debates on topics, and so it's a very rich source of knowledge base for you all. And in the end, you can download this report, you can share it, and I also want to suggest that most of us work with a team, so perhaps you and your team might have different viewpoints, and Apogee provides you to do a sign-up feature where you can get your team involved. So if Chris and I both work at a telecom company and we might have different perspectives, I can fill out the survey, he can do it, and we can compare where we have discrepancies. And honestly, in terms of discrepancies, that's where you have the most interesting dialogue for change, because alignment is so critical to us as a team working in unison towards one strategy. And so that's where coming together as a team, leading the charge and focusing on shared goals and shared outcomes becomes a tool that Compass can help you achieve. So with that, I think we only have a few minutes left. I want to take a look at the questions that might have come up for today. There's a lot of content, so I can understand if you're probably digesting all of this as well. Okay. All right. So if you do have any questions afterwards, I know I sometimes attend certain webcasts and I'm like, oh, I wish I asked those questions, but now the moment is gone. So I'm going to have my email at the end of this webinar. You can take it down and feel free to contact me anytime, or you can contact us through apogee.com, and we're happy to speak with you and get a conversation going. The question is, how does Apogee API model, is it cost effective for any organization? Right. I would say, so Apogee has actually looked very deeply in terms of how our cost model or our pricing structures are. And we've done it in such a way that it's actually based on a mixture of both consumption and how many users are using the software. So to give you some ideas, Ashish, on that question, we have customers that are small businesses, and they're just starting on the API program. They're experimenting, and so they're literally paying like very little, hundreds of dollars a month. There's even a free trial so that you can come on and just use it for free, and we have many customers who just trial for a month or two to prove it out. And since it's a SaaS-based software, that's our primary option, and there's also on-prem as well. But if you just want to try it out, there's no cost, and you can get an API going and see how it works and test it out. And then for our customers who are really building ecosystems and using APIs as their enterprise strategy, there's certainly going to be more cost because they're onboarding 10, 20, 30, hundreds of users, building APIs and consuming through multiple channels. So for them, there's going to be more cost. But I think it's one of those where you are paying based on how much you're using the platform. And I think that's a pretty fair price or pretty fair model in terms of what that is. So it's very different based on the organization. So I think we are flexible to understand that there are companies in different levels of usage. And if you are interested, you can go onto our website and there's a pricing model there. There's a pricing link there as well. Okay, next question is, Apogee generally talks about API interfaces without ever talking about modernizing the services that provide them. Is this intentional? And can the two topics really be separated? I think that's a really great question, and it kind of shows some depth in terms of how you're thinking and perhaps what you're facing internally within your company, because you have services that might be very entangled. And I think when we meet customers, some of the big problems they have is monolithic systems, right? They've bolted on over time, and so it's very hard to separate them. And they're building, let's say, a microservices strategy. Actually, we actually have a webinar coming up about microservices. We understand, Scott, just like your question, that there's a certain amount of change internally in your services that has to be done in order for you to perhaps expose some APIs. But I'd also like to challenge you to think about it a little bit more as well, in that every company we've met, I don't think I've ever met a customer that said, hey, we have a great backend. It's like totally modular, microservice-based, and we're ready to expose internal services. Everybody's got problems, Scott, everybody. And the thing is, if you spend all your time and resources changing your backend and you forget about the business drivers on the front end, then essentially, you're going to have a stall-out problem. And so what we ask our customers to think about is, yes, you're going to have to modernize some services on the back end, but really bring the business equation in. Modernize only the services that are going to drive business value. Yes, you can go for speed and efficiency and lower costs and all that, but in the end, to be a real driver for the business, how are you going to drive revenue, drive sales, increase new markets, and change your business model? And that's what's relevant for the executives. That's what's relevant for the CEOs. So how are you going to be able to enable that? And modernization of services is critical, but you have to do it from a business priority lens. So we ask you to think about it from an MVP state. And what can you monetize on the back end? Focus on the business on the front end. I hope that helps. Okay, so we are almost at the end of our hour. I thought those two are great, and please reach out to me if you have more questions. So I want to ask you guys to take a moment here and tell us a little bit about what you like most about this webinar today. Any feedback is welcome. And then also what you'd like to see in future webinars. So, your feedback is important. What kind of challenges you're facing out there in the market is also super important to us in terms of understanding how we can help you with your journey. And last of all, thank you all for taking the time today to join us. I hope you found it valuable. Thank you to Chris and Stephanie for joining me today as well from the Apogee side. And if you still have questions, please reach out to me, my email there, raymondpang@google.com. Love to hear from you and start up a dialogue. And with that, good luck. Best of luck on the holidays, and enjoy the holidays in the new year.